In the heart of a busy city stood St. Vincent's Hospital, a place where life and death intertwined every single day. The hospital was always alive with activity, doctors rushing down hallways, nurses juggling tasks, and patients hoping for good news. Among the staff was a nurse who had been working there for over 10 years. Her name was Clara, and while she was skilled at her job, she wasn't exactly known for her kindness. Over time, Clara had developed a habit of judging people before even speaking to them. She often let her biases guide how she treated patients, though no one ever called her out on it. One morning, as the sun peeked through the blinds of the maternity ward, a young woman walked in holding her belly tightly. She looked tired but determined, her face lined with worry. This was Maya, 8 months pregnant and feeling something unusual that made her anxious. Her steps were slow, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure whether coming here was the right decision. Still, she approached the reception desk hoping someone would listen. Clara glanced up from her clipboard when she noticed Maya standing there. At first glance, she took in everything: the dark skin, the simple clothes, the nervous expression, and immediately decided what kind of person Maya was. Without asking any questions or checking her condition, Clara sighed loudly. "You're probably just having Braxton Hicks contractions," she said dismissively, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Those happen all the time. Go home and rest." Maya blinked, taken aback by the coldness in Clara's tone. "But I don't think this is normal," she stammered, trying to explain. "It feels different this time, like pressure, sharp pain." Clara cut her off mid-sentence. "Look, we're busy here," she snapped, gesturing vaguely toward the crowded waiting area. "If you really feel like something's wrong, come back later. For now, stop wasting everyone's time." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. She felt small, embarrassed, and more scared than ever. What if something was seriously wrong? But Clara's authority left little room for argument. With trembling hands, Maya turned around and walked out of the hospital, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. What neither Clara nor Maya knew at that moment was that their lives were about to collide in ways neither could have imagined. Maya didn't return home alone. Instead, she went straight to her husband's office. He was a man of influence, someone whose decisions shaped the future of healthcare in the city. And unbeknownst to Clara, he happened to own St. Vincent's Hospital. As Maya recounted her experience to her husband, his jaw tightened with anger. No one treated his wife or anyone else with such disrespect in an institution he had built to serve everyone equally. Quietly, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. By the end of the call, plans were set in motion that would change Clara's life forever. For now, however, Clara remained blissfully unaware. She continued her shift, dismissing Maya's visit as just another inconvenience in her already stressful day. Little did she know, karma had a way of catching up with people when they least expected it. Across the city, in a high-rise office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling streets below, sat Maya's husband. He was a man of quiet strength, someone who preferred action over words. His name wasn't important here. What mattered was his role. As the owner of St. Vincent's Hospital, he had dedicated years to building an institution that stood for fairness, compassion, and quality care for everyone, regardless of their background. But today, his mind wasn't on budgets or board meetings. It was on his wife. When Maya walked into his office, her face pale and her eyes red from holding back tears, he immediately knew something was wrong. She hesitated at first, unsure how to explain what had happened without sounding like she was exaggerating. Finally, she took a deep breath and told him everything. The dismissive attitude, the lack of basic concern, the way Clara had brushed her off without even checking her vitals. Her husband listened silently, his expression unreadable. But inside, a storm was brewing. Every word Maya spoke lit a fire in him, not just as a protective spouse, but as someone who had poured his heart into ensuring that no patient ever felt neglected or mistreated in his hospital. When Maya finished, she looked up at him, expecting anger or frustration. Instead, he reached out and held her hand tightly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said softly, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "But don't worry, I'll handle it. Maya nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She trusted her husband completely, but she also knew how seriously he took matters involving the hospital. If there was one thing he couldn't tolerate, it was injustice, especially when it came to the people who relied on St. Vincent's for care. Later that afternoon, he picked up his phone and dialed the hospital administrator. "I need you to pull the records of every interaction in the maternity ward today," he instructed firmly, "and I want to see them by tomorrow morning." The administrator didn't ask questions. They knew better than to second-guess him. After hanging up, he leaned back in his chair, staring out at the skyline. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of disappointment, not just in Clara, but in the system that sometimes failed those it was meant to protect. The next day, armed with the details of what had transpired, he made his way to the hospital. Dressed in a sharp suit that commanded respect, he entered the maternity ward with purpose. Nurses and staff members recognized him instantly, some pausing mid-task to greet him politely. Clara, however, barely glanced up from her clipboard when he approached her station. To her, he was just another executive making rounds, someone whose presence didn't directly affect her daily routine. "Can I speak with you privately?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Clara blinked, surprised by the request but too professional to refuse. She followed him to a quiet corner of the ward where he turned to face her. For a brief moment, she noticed the intensity in his gaze, but she quickly dismissed it. After all, she reasoned, what could he possibly want with her? "I understand you sent a pregnant woman away yesterday," he began, cutting straight to the point. Clara stiffened slightly, caught off guard by the directness of his question. Still, she recovered quickly, putting on her most confident smile. "Oh yes," she replied, her voice steady. She came in complaining about pain, but it sounded like typical Braxton Hicks contractions. I advised her to return if she thought it was serious. The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice colder than she'd ever heard before, he said, "That woman is my wife." Clara froze, her smile vanishing instantly. Her mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. The pieces clicked together. The nervous young woman, the complaints about being ignored, and suddenly, the gravity of her mistake hit her like a freight train. Her cheeks flushed red, and for the first time in years, she found herself utterly speechless. "She came to this hospital seeking help," he continued, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Instead, she was dismissed because of your assumptions. Do you have any idea how dangerous that could have been? My wife was experiencing complications that required immediate attention. Complications that could have endangered both her life and our child's." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. All she could do was stand there, trembling under the weight of his words. Around them, the ward seemed to grow, quieter, as though the entire staff sensed the tension between them. Some nurses exchanged worried glances while others pretended not to notice, but everyone knew one misstep, and careers could be ruined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Clara managed to choke out a weak apology. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have checked her properly. I shouldn't have assumed." "You're right," he interrupted, his voice softening slightly but still carrying an edge. "You shouldn't have assumed, and now you'll have to live with the consequences of your actions. This isn't just about my wife, it's about every single person who walks through those doors. They deserve respect, care, and attention, regardless of who they are or where they come from." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing alone in the middle of the ward. For the first time in her career, she felt truly small. The walls of the hospital, once a place where she felt untouchable, now seemed to close in around her. As the reality of what had happened sank in, she realized that this wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a reckoning, and it was only the beginning. News traveled fast in St. Vincent's Hospital, especially when it involved someone as influential as the owner himself. By lunchtime, whispers about what had happened between Clara and the man she now realized was Maya's husband filled the hallways. Nurses huddled in corners, exchanging knowing glances and speculating about what would happen next. Some felt sympathy for Clara. They knew how stressful the job could be, but most were critical of her behavior. After all, they worked in a field where compassion was supposed to come first. For Clara, the rest of the day passed in a blur. Every time she walked past a colleague, she felt their eyes on her, judging silently. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She replayed the conversation with Maya's husband over and over in her mind, his words echoing like a drumbeat. This isn't just about my wife, it's about every single person who walks through those doors. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she hadn't meant any harm, but deep down she knew there was no excuse for what she'd done. Her assumptions had put a pregnant woman at risk, and nothing could change that fact. For the first time in years, Clara questioned the way she treated people. Had she become so jaded by long hours and difficult patients that she stopped seeing them as human beings? The thought terrified her. Later that afternoon, Maya returned to the hospital, this time accompanied by her husband. Word spread quickly among the staff, and everyone scrambled to ensure her visit went smoothly. When she arrived at the maternity ward, she was greeted warmly by a senior doctor who immediately ordered tests to assess her condition. As it turned out, Maya's instincts had been right all along. The pain she'd felt wasn't just normal pregnancy discomfort. It was a sign of complications that needed immediate attention. Thankfully, catching it early meant they could prevent anything serious from happening. While Maya rested in a private room after the examination, her husband sought out Clara once again. This time, he didn't confront her publicly. Instead, he asked to speak with her in his office, a space usually reserved for high-level meetings. Clara followed him reluctantly, her heart pounding with dread. She had no idea what awaited her behind those closed doors. When they sat down across from each other, he began speaking in a calm but firm tone. "I've decided not to fire you," he said, surprising her. Clara blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "But this isn't because I'm letting you off the hook," he continued. "You made a grave error, one that could have cost my family dearly. However, I believe in second chances, for those willing to earn them." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "Starting tomorrow, you'll attend mandatory diversity training sessions. You'll also volunteer your time at community clinics serving marginalized groups. I want you to hear their stories, understand their struggles, and learn firsthand why empathy matters in healthcare. If, after all this, you can prove to me, and more importantly, to yourself, that you've changed, then maybe we can move forward. But if not..." He let the sentence hang unfinished, leaving Clara to fill in the blanks. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded vigorously. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promise, I'll do better. I swear." Her sincerity seemed genuine, though only time would tell if her actions would match her words. For now, he accepted her apology and dismissed her, hoping against hope that she would rise to the challenge. Over the following days, life at St. Vincent's began to shift. News of what had happened prompted the administration to implement sweeping changes aimed at addressing bias within the hospital. Posters went up in break rooms reminding staff to treat every patient with dignity and respect. Anonymous feedback forms were introduced, allowing patients to report discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. Meanwhile, Maya recovered fully under the watchful care of doctors and nurses, who were determined to make amends. Though she still carried some lingering resentment toward Clara, she chose forgiveness over bitterness. One afternoon, as she prepared to leave the hospital, she spotted Clara standing nervously near the exit. Clara approached her hesitantly, wringing her hands together. Can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked quietly. Maya hesitated before nodding, unsure of what to expect. "I just wanted to say how sorry I am," Clara began, her voice breaking slightly. "What I did was wrong, and I'll carry that regret with me forever. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. For you, for your baby, and for everyone else I might see in the future." Maya studied her for a long moment, searching for sincerity in her expression. Finally, she offered a small, weary smile. "We all make mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is whether we learn from them." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, something shifted, not just for her but for the entire hospital. It became clear that change wasn't going to happen overnight, but it had to start somewhere. And sometimes all it took was one brave person to admit they were wrong to spark a ripple effect that could transform an entire institution. As Maya walked away, holding her husband's hand tightly, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that the lessons learned from this experience would pave the way for a brighter, kinder future, not just for her family, but for everyone who stepped through the doors of St. Vincent's Hospital. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Clara. Each morning as she stepped into the hospital, she felt the weight of countless eyes watching her. Some looked at her with pity, others with disdain, but all carried a silent judgment that made her skin crawl. It was uncomfortable, yes, but it was also necessary. For years, Clara had moved through life thinking she was untouchable, confident in her skills and indifferent to how her actions affected others. Now, stripped of that illusion, she was forced to confront the truth. She had been part of the problem. Her first step toward redemption came in the form of mandatory diversity training sessions. At first, Clara resented them. She saw them as punishment, an extra burden added to her already overwhelming workload. But as the weeks went by, something shifted inside her. During one session, a panel of women shared their personal experiences of being dismissed or mistreated during pregnancy because of their race, income level, or appearance. One woman spoke about how doctors ignored her concerns until it was almost too late, leaving her with lifelong health issues. Another recounted the fear she felt when no one took her seriously, even as she begged for help. Clara listened intently, her chest tightening with each story. These weren't just statistics or abstract cases, they were real people who had suffered because someone like her hadn't listened. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel empathy instead of defensiveness. By the end of the session, tears streamed down her face as she realized the harm caused by bias, whether intentional or not. But classroom lessons weren't enough. To truly understand what she'd done wrong, Clara had to step outside her comfort zone. Her next assignment was volunteering at a community clinic in one of the city's underserved neighborhoods. The clinic was nothing like St. Vincent's Hospital. Its walls were chipped, its equipment outdated, and its waiting room always overcrowded. Yet, despite the challenges, the staff worked tirelessly to care for patients who often had nowhere else to turn. On her first day, Clara shadowed a midwife named Ruth, a warm and patient woman who seemed to know everyone by name. Ruth introduced Clara to several pregnant women, explaining their unique struggles, from financial hardships to lack of access to proper prenatal care. Clara watched as Ruth treated each woman with kindness and respect, taking the time to listen to their fears and answer their questions. One patient stood out to Clara, a young mother-to-be named Lisa. Barely 20 years old, Lisa juggled 2 jobs while caring for her toddler. She confided in Ruth about her anxiety over giving birth alone since her family lived far away. As Clara observed the interaction, she noticed how Ruth reassured Lisa without dismissing her worries. "You're stronger than you think," Ruth told her gently, "and we're here to support you every step of the way." Standing there, Clara couldn't help but compare this moment to the way she'd treated Maya. Where Ruth offered compassion and understanding, Clara had given indifference and judgment. The contrast hit her like a punch to the gut. That night, as she drove home, she broke down in tears, overwhelmed by guilt but also determined to change. Back at St. Vincent's, Maya continued her recovery under the watchful care of doctors and nurses who were eager to make amends. Though initially hesitant to return to the hospital after her ordeal, she found solace in the efforts being made to improve patient care. Posters reminding staff to treat everyone equally lined the walls, and new policies ensured that complaints about discrimination were taken seriously. One afternoon, as Maya sat in the waiting area, she overheard a conversation between 2 nurses discussing recent changes. "It's about time," one of them said. We can't keep letting bias dictate how we treat people. The other nodded in agreement. If anything good came out of what happened, it's that we're finally addressing these issues head-on. Maya smiled faintly, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't expected. While forgiveness didn't come easily to her, she appreciated the hospital's willingness to learn from its mistakes. Change wasn't going to happen overnight, but progress was progress, and that was worth celebrating. Meanwhile, her husband remained a driving force behind the reforms. He held meetings with department heads, pushing for accountability and transparency. He also advocated for additional resources to support marginalized communities, ensuring that everyone received the care they deserved. His dedication inspired many within the hospital, including some who had previously doubted the need for such sweeping changes. As the months passed, small victories began to add up. Patients reported feeling more respected during their visits. Staff members grew more mindful of their biases, actively working to overcome them. And though tensions occasionally flared, old habits died hard, the overall atmosphere improved significantly. For Clara, the journey was far from easy. There were days when self-doubt crept in, making her wonder if she'd ever truly earn back the trust she'd lost. But every time she interacted with someone like Lisa or heard another powerful story during training, she reminded herself why. She had to keep going. Change wasn't just about fixing external systems. It was about transforming hearts, including her own. By the end of the year, Clara had become a different person. She still had moments of weakness, times when old instincts threatened to surface, but she caught herself before acting on them. Slowly but surely, she rebuilt her relationships with colleagues and patients alike. Some forgave her quickly, others took longer. But what mattered most was that she was trying, and that effort didn't go unnoticed. In the maternity ward, where everything had begun, Clara found a renewed sense of purpose. She started mentoring newer nurses, sharing the lessons she'd learned about empathy and humility. When asked why she cared so much now, she simply replied, "Because I know what happens when we don't." What started as a single mistake had sparked a chain reaction, forcing everyone involved to reflect on their roles in creating a fairer, kinder world. And while scars remained, from hurt feelings to lingering doubts, they served as reminders of the power of growth and redemption. In the end, it wasn't perfection that mattered, but the courage to strive for something better. Months had passed since the incident that shook St. Vincent's Hospital to its core. The changes implemented in its wake were beginning to take root, slowly transforming the culture of the institution. For Clara, the journey toward redemption wasn't just about attending training sessions or volunteering at community clinics. It was about proving to herself and others that she could be better. Every day felt like a test, but she approached it with determination, knowing there was no room for failure. One morning, as Clara prepared for her shift, she noticed something different in the maternity ward. Posters reminding staff to treat every patient with dignity now hung prominently on the walls, accompanied by quotes from real patients who had once felt neglected, but were now receiving the care they deserved. A new policy required nurses to spend extra time listening to each patient's concerns before jumping to conclusions. These small, yet meaningful adjustments made the atmosphere feel lighter, more compassionate. Clara began her rounds, stopping, first at the bedside of a young woman named Maria. Pregnant with twins, Maria had been admitted earlier that week due to high blood pressure. As Clara checked her vitals, she asked gentle questions about how Maria was feeling. Not just physically, but emotionally. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed," Clara said softly when Maria hesitated before admitting she was scared. "You're not alone. We're here to help you through this." Maria looked up at her, surprised by the warmth in Clara's voice. "Thank you," she murmured, clutching her hands together nervously. "I didn't think anyone would really listen." That moment stayed with Clara long after she left Maria's room. It reminded her why she had chosen nursing in the first place, to make a difference in people's lives. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of that purpose. But now, bit by bit, she was rediscovering it. Meanwhile, Maya returned to the hospital for her final checkup before giving birth. Her pregnancy had progressed smoothly, thanks to the attentive care she received following the initial mishap. Though she still carried some lingering resentment toward Clara, she couldn't deny the positive changes happening around her. Nurses greeted her warmly. Doctors took their time explaining procedures, and the overall environment felt welcoming rather than intimidating. As Maya waited in the examination room, she thought back to the day she had walked out of the hospital, feeling dismissed and humiliated. Back then, she never imagined she'd return with such hope and trust, yet here she was, ready to bring new life into the world, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her well-being. When Clara entered the room to assist the doctor, Maya tensed slightly. She hadn't seen Clara since their brief conversation, months ago, and the memory of that encounter still stung. But instead of avoiding eye contact or rushing through the appointment, Clara paused and offered a sincere smile. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, her tone warm and genuine. Maya hesitated before replying. "Nervous, I guess, but also excited." Clara nodded understandingly. "That's completely normal. You've got this." She then proceeded to explain the next steps of Maya's care, answering all her questions patiently. By the end of the visit, Maya found herself relaxing slightly, even managing a small smile. While forgiveness wouldn't come overnight, she appreciated Clara's effort to make amends. Change wasn't limited to individual interactions. It extended throughout the hospital. Inspired by Maya's husband's leadership, the administration introduced monthly workshops where staff members shared stories of challenges they faced while treating diverse patients. These sessions weren't mandatory, but attendance grew steadily as word spread about their impact. Nurses, doctors, and support staff gathered in a conference room, sitting in a circle as they listened to one another's experiences. During one workshop, a nurse recounted a difficult case involving an elderly immigrant couple who spoke little English. Initially, miscommunication led to frustration on both sides, but with patience and the use of translation tools, the team managed to provide the care the couple needed. Another nurse shared how she overcame her own biases when treating a teenager from a low-income neighborhood, realizing that judgment only created barriers to effective care. Clara attended every session, soaking in each story like a sponge. Hearing her colleagues open up about their struggles and triumphs reinforced her belief that growth came from vulnerability. One evening, during a particularly emotional meeting, Clara decided to share her own story. Her voice trembled as she recounted the day she turned Maya away and the shame she felt afterward. "I used to think I knew what was best for everyone," she admitted. "But I was wrong, and I'm still learning. Every single day." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Then someone clapped softly, followed by another person until the entire group erupted into applause. In that moment, Clara realized she wasn't alone in her journey. Everyone in the room carried their own burdens, their own lessons learned the hard way. Together they formed a community committed to doing better. Outside the hospital, Maya's husband continued his efforts to promote equitable health care. He partnered with local organizations to host free prenatal classes for underserved communities, ensuring that expectant mothers had access to vital information and resources. At St. Vincent's, he spearheaded initiatives aimed at reducing maternal mortality rates among women of color, citing statistics that highlighted the disparities in care. His dedication inspired many within the hospital, including some who had initially resisted change. One senior doctor confessed to him privately, "I always thought we were doing enough. But your work has shown me that enough isn't good enough, not when lives are at stake." By the end of the year, St. Vincent's Hospital had become a model for other institutions striving to address bias and inequality in healthcare. News outlets featured stories about the reforms, praising the hospital's commitment to creating a more inclusive environment. Patients expressed gratitude for the improved quality of care, and staff members reported feeling more connected to their mission. For Clara, the transformation was profound. She rose through the ranks, earning promotions based not on seniority, but on her newfound dedication to compassionate care. When the head nurse position opened up in the maternity ward, she applied with confidence, determined to lead by example. To her surprise and relief, she got the job. On her first day as head nurse, Clara stood in front of her team, addressing them with humility and resolve. "We're not perfect," she began, her voice steady, "and we'll probably never be. But what matters is that we keep trying. Every patient who walks through those doors deserves our best, not because it's our job, but because it's the right thing to do." Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from everyone present. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they also knew they were moving in the right direction. As Clara stepped down from the podium, she caught a glimpse of Maya walking past the ward. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya offered a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was progress, and sometimes that was enough. Months turned into a year, and St. Vincent's Hospital continued to evolve in ways that no one could have predicted at the start of this journey. The changes weren't just surface level. They were deeply rooted in the hearts and minds of those who worked there. For Clara, every day brought new opportunities to prove herself, not just as a competent nurse, but as someone who truly cared about the people she served. One chilly December morning, Clara arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. She wanted to review the patient files before her shift began, ensuring she understood each person's unique needs. As she flipped through the charts, one name caught her eye, a young woman named Lisa. Clara recognized her immediately. Lisa was the same patient she had met months ago during her time volunteering at the community clinic. Back then, Lisa had been nervous and unsure, juggling 2 jobs while preparing for motherhood alone. Now here she was, ready to deliver her baby at St. Vincent's. Clara felt a surge of pride knowing that Lisa trusted the hospital enough to come back. When she entered Lisa's room later that day, she greeted her warmly. "How are you holding up?" Clara asked, her tone light but genuine. Lisa smiled faintly, though her hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket covering her lap. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "What if I can't do this?" Clara pulled up a chair and sat beside her, meeting her gaze with steady assurance. "You're stronger than you think," she said, echoing the words Ruth, the midwife from the clinic, had once told Lisa. "And you're not doing this alone. We're all here with you." For the next several hours, Clara stayed by Lisa's side, coaching her through contractions and offering encouragement whenever doubt crept in. When Lisa finally gave birth to a healthy baby boy, tears streamed down both their faces. In that moment, Clara realized how far she'd come. A year ago, she might have dismissed Lisa's fears or rushed through the process without taking the time to connect. But now, she understood that compassion wasn't just an optional add-on. It was essential to good care. Meanwhile, Maya prepared for the arrival of her own child. After months of careful monitoring and support, she was finally nearing her due date. Her pregnancy had been a roller coaster of emotions, but thanks to the improved care at St. Vincent's, she felt more confident about the future. Still, the memory of being turned away lingered in the back of her mind, serving as a reminder of how fragile trust could be. On the day of her delivery, Maya's husband accompanied her to the hospital, his presence a source of strength and comfort. As they checked in, Maya couldn't help but notice the subtle differences in the way staff interacted with patients. Gone were the hurried glances and dismissive attitudes she'd encountered before. Instead, everyone seemed genuinely invested in making sure she felt safe and supported. When Clara walked into the delivery room, Maya tensed slightly, memories of their past encounter flooding back. But Clara didn't let the awkwardness linger. "We're going to take great care of you today," she said firmly, her voice filled with determination. "You've got nothing to worry about." Throughout the labor, Clara worked alongside the medical team, ensuring that Maya's concerns were addressed promptly. When complications arose unexpectedly midway through the delivery, Clara sprang into action, staying calm under pressure and guiding Maya through each step. Hours later, when a tiny baby girl was placed in Maya's arms, the relief and joy in the room were palpable. Maya looked up at Clara, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft cries of her newborn. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, it was gratitude, And for Clara, that meant everything. As word spread about the successful deliveries of both Lisa and Maya, the hospital celebrated these milestones as symbols of progress. The administration organized a small gathering to honor the staff members who had contributed to creating such a supportive environment. Nurses, doctors, and support staff gathered in the cafeteria, sharing stories and laughter over slices of cake. During the event, Maya's husband took the stage to address the crowd. Dressed casually yet commanding attention effortlessly, he thanked everyone for their hard work and dedication. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, his voice resonating throughout the room. "It takes courage, commitment, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Tonight we celebrate not perfection but progress." He paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. "To all of you who have embraced this journey, thank you. To those who still struggle with it, remember, growth isn't linear. What matters is that we keep moving forward, together." His speech ended with thunderous applause, and Clara found herself clapping along with everyone else. Yet amidst the celebration, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had started this journey ashamed of her actions, convinced she'd never regain the respect of her peers or patients. Now, standing among colleagues who cheered her on, she realized she had earned something far greater than redemption. She had earned trust. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm of hope and healing. Maya returned home with her daughter naming her Hope, a tribute to the resilience they had shown together. Lisa visited the hospital regularly for postpartum checkups, always stopping by to thank Clara for her unwavering support. Even the wider community began to notice the positive changes at St. Vincent's, with more families choosing the hospital for their healthcare needs. For Clara, the transformation went beyond professional success. She became a mentor to newer nurses, teaching them the importance of empathy and active listening. During training sessions, she often shared her story openly, reminding others that mistakes were opportunities for growth. "If I can change, so can you," she would say, her words carrying weight because they came from experience. The hospital itself became a beacon of hope, not just locally, but nationally. Other institutions reached out to learn about St. Vincent's approach to addressing bias and improving patient care. Workshops expanded, partnerships grew, and slowly but surely, the ripple effect of change spread far beyond the hospital walls. Yet despite all the accolades and achievements, what mattered most to Clara was the human connection she fostered every day. Whether it was holding a frightened mother's hand during labor or simply listening to a patient's concerns, she knew she was making a difference, one person at a time. As she stood in the maternity ward late one evening, watching the city, lights flicker outside the window, Clara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about where she had started and how far she had come. Mistakes had shaped her journey, yes, but so had courage, humility, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could leave lasting impacts. In the end, it wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a better future. And as long as there were lives to touch and hearts to heal, Clara knew her work was far from done. A year had passed since the events that transformed St. Vincent's Hospital, and the institution now stood as a testament to resilience and growth. Clara, once defined by her biases and mistakes, had become a symbol of change, not just within the hospital but in the broader community. Her journey wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old habits threatened to creep back in. But each time she caught herself reminding herself of the lessons she'd learned along the way. One crisp autumn evening, the hospital hosted its annual gala, a celebration of achievements and milestones over the past year. The event was held in a grand ballroom adorned with twinkling lights and elegant floral arrangements. Staff members mingled with donors, patients, and local leaders, sharing stories of triumph and gratitude. It was a night meant to honor progress, and at the center of it all stood Maya's husband, whose vision and determination had sparked the transformation. As the crowd settled into their seats, he stepped onto the stage, greeted by enthusiastic applause. Dressed in a sharp suit that exuded authority, he began his speech with a simple yet powerful message. "Tonight, We celebrate not what we've achieved, but who we've become. His words resonated deeply, especially with Clara, who sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She listened intently as he spoke about the importance of empathy, accountability, and unity. He highlighted specific examples of how the hospital had improved patient care, from implementing bias training programs to expanding outreach efforts in underserved neighborhoods. Each story painted a picture of an institution striving to live up to its ideals. Then, unexpectedly, he turned his attention to Clara. "There's someone here tonight who embodies the spirit of this journey," he said, his voice softening. "When I first met her, I was angry because she represented everything wrong with our system. But instead of giving up on her, we chose to believe in her potential for growth. And let me tell you, she has proven us right." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Clara. Her cheeks flushed red, and for a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable. But then she saw Maya sitting a few rows away, smiling faintly at her. In that smile, Clara found strength. She rose slowly to her feet, accepting the spotlight with humility. "I didn't deserve a second chance," Clara admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I was given one anyway. And because of that, I've learned what it truly means to care for my patients, for my colleagues, and for myself. This isn't just my story, it's ours. Together we've shown that change is possible, even when it feels impossible." Her words earned a standing ovation, the kind that sent shivers down spines and brought tears to eyes. For Clara, it was more than recognition. It was validation. She had spent so long carrying the weight of her past actions, convinced she could never make amends. Now, surrounded by people who believed in her, she realized forgiveness wasn't something you begged for. It was something you earned through effort and sincerity. After the gala, life at St. Vincent's continued to flourish. Patients praised the staff for their kindness and attentiveness, while employees reported feeling more connected to their mission than ever before. Even small gestures like greeting visitors warmly or taking extra time to explain procedures made a big difference. The hospital became known not just for its medical excellence but for its heart. For Maya, the changes meant peace of mind. With Io, her daughter growing stronger every day, she visited the hospital regularly for checkups, always leaving with a sense of satisfaction. Though she hadn't fully forgiven Clara, she respected the effort she'd put into becoming a better person. Their interactions, though brief, carried an unspoken understanding. They were both part of something bigger. Meanwhile, Lisa thrived in her new role as a mother. She often returned to the hospital for parenting workshops, bringing her baby boy along. During one visit, she approached Clara with a heartfelt thank you. "You changed my life," she said simply, her eyes shining with emotion. "I'll never forget that." Clara hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by the realization that her work mattered. Every life she touched reminded her why she had chosen nursing in the first place, to make a difference. Years later, St. Vincent's Hospital remained a beacon of hope and healing. Its walls bore witness to countless stories of struggle and triumph, pain, and joy. Among those stories was Clara's, a tale of redemption, courage, and transformation. She eventually retired after decades of service, leaving behind a legacy of compassion that inspired generations of healthcare workers. On her final day, as she walked through the maternity ward one last time, she paused to watch a young nurse, comforting a nervous, expectant mother. The scene filled her with pride, knowing she had played a part in shaping the culture of care that now defined the hospital. Before stepping out of the building for the last time, Clara glanced at the plaque, mounted near the entrance. It read, "Every patient deserves dignity, respect, and unwavering support. Let this be our promise." Beneath the inscription was a quote attributed to her. "Change starts with admitting you're wrong and committing to do better." She drove home that evening. Clara reflected on her journey. She thought about the mistakes that had humbled her, the people who had challenged her, and the lives she had touched along the way. Life wasn't about being perfect. It was about striving to be better day after day, and in that pursuit, she had found purpose. The hospital carried on without her, but her influence lingered in every corner, from the posters reminding staff to treat everyone equally to the policies ensuring no patient was ever dismissed again. St. Vincent's wasn't just a place where babies were born and lives were saved. It was a place where hearts healed and humanity prevailed. And so, the story came full circle, not with vengeance or bitterness, but with hope and healing. Because sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. Though the story of St. Vincent's Hospital seemed to reach a satisfying conclusion, life has a way of continuing long after we think the final chapter is written. Years rolled by, and the hospital remained a cornerstone of the community, a place where people came not just for treatment but for understanding, care, and hope. Clara's legacy lived on in subtle yet profound ways, shaping the attitudes and actions of everyone who passed through its doors. One sunny spring afternoon, Maya returned to the hospital, not as a patient this time but as a volunteer. Her daughter, Hope, was now 6 years old, full of energy and curiosity about the world. Maya had spent countless hours explaining to her why her name carried so much meaning. Hope isn't just a word, she would say. It's what happens when people work together to make things better. When Maya walked into the maternity ward, she felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. The walls looked different now, brighter, more welcoming. But the spirit of compassion remained unchanged. She introduced herself to the head nurse, offering to assist wherever needed. Whether it was holding a mother's hand during labor or helping new parents navigate the overwhelming emotions that came with childbirth, Maya found joy in giving back. During one of her shifts, she crossed paths with Lisa, whose son was now a lively kindergartner. They hugged tightly, laughing about how their lives had intertwined through shared experiences at the hospital. "This place saved me," Lisa said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Not just physically, but emotionally. I don't know where I'd be without it." Maya nodded, feeling the same sentiment deep in her heart. While she still carried memories of being dismissed and humiliated, those feelings no longer defined her relationship with the hospital. Instead, she focused on the positive changes that had emerged from adversity. Meanwhile, Clara's influence continued to ripple outward, even after her retirement. Young nurses often spoke of her during training sessions, recounting stories of how she had turned her mistakes into lessons for others. One such nurse, a woman in her mid-20s named Rachel, had been particularly inspired by Clara's journey. Rachel had grown up hearing tales of inequality in healthcare from her grandmother, who had faced discrimination as a young mother. Determined to break the cycle, Rachel chose nursing as her career, vowing to treat every patient with dignity. One evening, as Rachel prepared for her shift, she reflected on a recent interaction with a pregnant teenager who had arrived at the hospital alone and terrified. At first, the girl refused to speak, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. But instead of rushing her or brushing off her fear, Rachel sat beside her, offering quiet reassurance. "You're safe here," she had said softly. "We're going to take care of you." The memory stayed with Rachel as she tied her scrubs and reviewed the day's schedule. She knew she couldn't change the world overnight, but she believed that small acts of kindness could create waves of impact. And in moments like these, she felt Clara's presence guiding her, reminding her that empathy wasn't just a skill, it was a responsibility. Back at the hospital gala that year, Maya's husband took the stage once again, his hair streaked with gray but his voice as steady as ever. He thanked the staff for their dedication and acknowledged the progress they had made, yet he also reminded them that the work was never truly finished. "Compassion isn't something you achieve," he said. "It's something you practice every single day. We must remain vigilant, always asking ourselves, are we doing enough? Can we do better?" His words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement. Among them was Maya, seated proudly beside her husband, her daughter asleep, in her lap. As she listened, she thought about how far they had all come, not just as individuals but as a community. The hospital had become more than bricks and mortar. It was a living, breathing entity shaped by the people within it. After the event, Maya wandered through the halls, stopping to admire a mural painted by local artists. It depicted scenes of unity and resilience, mothers holding newborns, doctors, and nurses working side by side, hands reaching out to help one another. Beneath the artwork was an inscription, "Together, we rise." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she read the words. She remembered the pain of feeling invisible, the frustration of being dismissed, and the courage it took to stand up and demand better. Yet she also remembered the kindness of strangers, the strength of those who fought alongside her, and the belief that change was possible, even in the face of resistance. Years later, when Hope grew older and began asking questions about her name, Maya told her the story of St. Vincent's Hospital. She explained how a mistake had sparked a movement, how one person's willingness to admit fault had inspired others to grow, and how forgiveness and effort combined to heal wounds both visible and unseen. "And that's why your name is Hope," Maya concluded, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Because sometimes when things seem darkest, people find a way to shine." Hope listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder. "So, does that mean I have to make the world better too?" she asked innocently. Maya smiled, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly what it means." As they sat together under the warm glow of the living room lamp, Maya felt a surge of gratitude for the past, for the present, and for the future her daughter represented. Life wasn't perfect, and neither was the world. But as long as there were people willing to try, willing to care, and willing to hope, anything was possible. And so the story of St. Vincent's Hospital didn't end. It evolved. Each generation added its own chapter, weaving threads of compassion, resilience, and humanity into the tapestry of history. Through struggles and triumphs, failures and victories, the message remained clear. Change begins with us, all of us, and it starts with a single step toward kindness.